so much for joining our District 29 community meeting. We have had some requests for some potential rezonings. If you all have been following this series of meetings, I've kind of given an explanation before we get started, but I do see some new names here, so I want to make sure that everyone's kind of starting with the same information. So again, thank you all so much for taking some time out and joining us today. As we know, we have obviously been in a pandemic for the last year. And I also would like to acknowledge today is the 1 year anniversary of when the tornadoes ripped through our city and caused so much devastation to our city. So I know today has been a hard day for many people. So thank you all so much for taking some time out to come to this meeting today. But over the course of the last year, I have been reached out to by property owners and developers who have been looking for potential rezonings or who, wanted to get before the community to just talk through some ideas. And I held those meetings off because as I've kind of shared through social media and in the newsletter, and on these meetings, my top priority has been making sure that our district was okay and making sure that people had food and resources and masks, and students had access to technology for their digital learning and virtual classes. So kind of rezonings and development were really just pushed onto the back burner as my priority was making sure that you all were okay, and making sure that you all had the resources that you need. So with that, I've been very clear with any developer that does approach with any questions or potential rezonings. If it's something that I know the community is not interested in, I'll go ahead and let them know upfront that this is something that our community has stated that they're not interested in. If it's something that I think the community will be supportive of, or if it's something I think the community will just be neutral on, I do give them the opportunity to come out and just present to the community. So you will have the opportunity to give feedback here. If the community is in support, then we will move forward. If the community is not in support, then we don't move forward. Or the developer may come back with the revised plan. I also like to make sure that people understand that they have multiple opportunities to communicate any concerns, whether they're in support or whether they're not in support. They have multiple opportunities. So they can express that here during the community meeting. They also, if the project does move forward, they will have an opportunity to express their support or their lack of support at the planning commission meeting, because anything that goes forward has to go through the planning commission. And then if it makes it to the stage of us actually working through a rezoning, there are 3 readings on council. The second reading is a public hearing. So you all will have the opportunity to share any comments at that second reading. And you can always send me an email or a phone call to let me know that, either you have concerns or that you support a particular project. So I always like to be very, very upfront with that, because sometimes people think if we have a community meeting, sometimes people take that as like a done deal or that something is definitely moving forward. And I don't operate in that manner. I use these as a opportunity to democratize the rezoning process and to make sure that our neighbors all have a voice. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with the meeting. Oh, and one last thing that I would like to share before we get started, my apologies. Because we held off and because I held off on those meetings, this was, somewhat of a 3-part series to give individuals the opportunity to come forth and get in front of the community. So after today's meeting, we will go back to just our typical community meetings where we are discussing those community concerns and where we will, be able to discuss public safety, some of our upcoming litter walks, legislation, things of that nature. So, this is the kind of the last one in that series. And with regards to the litter walks, I have been having some conversations with individuals in the community. We are still not having those big community cleanups that we typically have a few times a year. Those were postponed due to COVID, and they've not started back up yet, but we are having litter walks. So I'm working with our beautification commissioner. We're actually planning one for this Saturday. So if anyone's interested, that information will be going back out in the morning. We'll send that information out with the details, but we have to keep a very small number, and we will be socially distant to make sure that we are complying with all protocols to keep everyone safe. And we're also looking for community leaders who would like to lead some of our litter walks. So if you are interested in being one of our D29 litter leaders, please send me an email to Delishia for district29@gmail.com, or you can send an email to beautifydistrict29@gmail.com. And we are keeping up with all of our volunteers that are signing up, as well as individuals that would like to kind of lead that process. And Randall, I see that you've joined us. Thank you. I have my eye on you as one of the people that may potentially be one of our litter leaders. So I'll be speaking with you after the meeting and in the days come to see if that's something you'll be interested in. But this is open to anyone in our community who's interested in helping to lead some of our litter walks. So thank you so much. And with that, we're going to go ahead and start with our first presentation. And Mr. White, are you guys good to go for the first presentation?
Yes, this is John Gordon, and we're here and ready.
Okay, Mr. Wilkinson, if you can give sharing privileges to Mr. Gordon, you all are recognized and you can go ahead and begin.
All right, John, you're the presenter now, so you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, let me make sure that you can hear me clearly. Is that good for everyone?
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
And then let me see if I can share my first slide. Okay, at this point, you should be seeing a map, which is the site for 2377 Couchville Pike. Is that what's on the screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, well then I'll start. Again, my name is John Gordon. I'll be presenting the requested rezoning at 2377 Couchville Pike. This was submitted in December and has been assigned a Metro number 2021Z 017 PR-001. So the request for this property is to rezone from R20 to IWD. To give a little background on that, the R20 is a residential zone, low to medium density, requiring a minimum 20,000 square foot lot intended for single and two family dwellings. IWD is industrial warehousing distribution intended for a wide range of warehousing, wholesaling, and bulk distribution uses, and that's taken from the Metro description of the zones. So to introduce you to the property, you can see on the map, it's outlined in green. This is from the Metro Maps GIS website. And then surrounding the property, we are just south of Couchville Pike. So on the north side, we have some AR2A zoning, some R15, some IWD. Moving on to the east of the site, there's some more IWD. Then south, we have IR. There's some AR2A and IR then to the south and west of the property. I'm going to go to my second map. All right, did that switch to the new map? Looks like it did.
It did.
Okay, this is the property on an aerial photo. So you can see to the west, we have the airport property, and then there is some already developed warehousing space just to the north and east of the property. And if you go far enough east along Couchville, you'll get to Bell Road. And if you go west along Couchville, it turns back down and gets to Knapp Boulevard and Donaldson Pike. And so with if the rezoning is approved, then those are the directions that we would expect that traffic would take from any development at the property. And so now I'll move on to a property map. So this is a property map now turned sideways, so north is to the left. But when we were discussing with Metro planning staff about the site, they suggested that we needed to have a drawing which would show what our usable area was. At first, when I was looking at this site, we had requested straight zoning to IWD, so I didn't create a plan because we don't have an end user or a future developer in mind. This would be rezoning by the current owner, but because of the need for some development numbers of buildable area and then that translating into actual building square footage to be used for the traffic study, which is being required by Metro and is underway, I worked on this map. So let me walk through this for a moment. The property is outlined in the darker green color. That is a 40-foot perimeter buffer, which is a Metro requirement for residential zoning against a use that is a industrial zone. So I took that out of the Metro documents and came up with that buffer. So that restricts the amount of space that we can use. Here on the bottom left of the drawing, there's a sort of an crosses the site. That is a easement. It's a utility easement that has both overhead power and underground pipeline that goes through there. So that is not a developable area. So there'd be no way for us to put buildings over that. And that's almost 4.7 acres. And then below that, there's some additional green space that I've listed as unused area, 1.27 acres, because it's too narrow to be used for an IWD use. Then looking just above the orange strip, which is the easement, you can see a blue strip which goes into the site. And that is a stream and stream buffer, which we've had checked and done. A hydrologic determination has been done on that and approved through the state. So we know where that is and where that buffer is. And then based on my conceptual layouts for the site, put our detention area above that, which is going to be about an acre. And so that space also is really not usable for building space, which is what Metro planning staff was trying to get at when they were wanting this drawing. And then at the right side of the drawing, there's another green space that I've called unused area by drainage divide. There's a hilltop on this property, and so to the left of that line drains over towards Couchville Pike, but to the right drains to the south. And so that area to the right green space is not usable area because it would require additional detention ponds and additional green infrastructure. So that's why I've marked that off. So that leads me to the gray area in the middle of the site, which is what Metro planning staff was looking for as far as what is the buildable area on this site. And so out of the 34.77 acres, there's about 16 acres that is buildable that you could work on placing a building, parking, offices, and those kind of things. And so from this, I'll go to my next drawing, which adds potential. What would that building and parking and truck access look like? Based on our previous submittals, this is slightly different because the planning staff wanted me to focus more on making a larger building as opposed to providing additional truck docks. And so that's why this is slightly different than the previous version of the map. All right, so does anybody have any questions about this layout so far? I want to remind you this layout is purely my layout as an engineer who does site development. There's not a future user that has requested this. This is purely what I put together to represent one potential layout so that we could work on our projected traffic counts for the traffic study and the usable space as requested by planning staff.
We'll address any questions because I do have some information that I want to share
Okay.
before we do questions. So if you have anything else on here that you want to present, if you could just continue with the presentation, then I will give some thoughts and feedback, and then we'll open it up for anyone in the community who wants to give any thoughts.
Okay, thank you. I've got two other things to mention. One is during conversations with you and with planning staff, there was concern about the maximum square footage that would be allowed on the site based on traffic concerns. And so one of the suggestions based on the most recent email from planning staff was a limitation of allowable building space to 500,000 square feet. And we would be agreeable to do that limit to the maximum building square footage on the site. And then finally, another concern was that some of the uses in IWD are different from what our intent is with the rezoning to allow this site to be a warehouse distribution site. The uses within IWD, some of those are in different categories that are not really related to a type site. And so that is from this use chart. So for example, some of these things under the waste management uses are allowable in an IWD zone, and we would be willing to remove those from the allowable uses on the property through the rezoning. So on the right, these industrial uses in the blue, IWD is the first column. And so collection center and recycling center are permitted uses, and we can eliminate those. And then other waste management uses that are permitted with different conditions, we could eliminate those as well. And so we could do this in the form of a regulatory SP. And then below those waste management uses, there's also recreational and entertainment uses. And a few of these are not related to our intended warehouse use, and that'd be adult entertainment, racetrack, and sex club that potentially could be part of IWD, and we would be willing to remove those from the list of allowable uses with the regulatory SP. And that concludes what I wanted to present for the site.
Thank you so much for that information. And again, I'll share some information and then we'll open it up to hear from the community. So, and I know that we have some people on with us today that had not been at some of the previous meetings. So I just, like to make sure that we're kind of all operating from the same starting point and with the same information. Over the last few years, and again, we slowed down having these meetings during COVID. But prior to COVID, we had at least 3 different community meetings where we've talked about the Couchville Pike area and the vision for Couchville Pike. That street, part of it is the proximity to the airport, the proximity to Bell Road, as well as the proximity to Donaldson Pike. The community has expressed repeatedly that they want this area to be more of an industrial warehouse area They do not want more residential homes in that area. So again, that was probably 3 meetings that were specifically for projects on Catchwell Pike. And then also at a District 29 planning meeting where we talked about different parts of the district and what people wanted to see in various parts of the district. This was addressed again, and it was the desire of people in the area. This is a business district, so this particular, like the Couchville Pike in the community plan, it would allow for things like, if there are warehouses and things, it does allow for childcare centers or restaurants or cafes and things to support a business district. So if you think about like a metro center, how they have, those kind of warehouses and office spaces, but then they also have like some restaurants. So it would support that type of development in the area. But the neighbors have been very clear that what they don't want to see is residential. We have done a few rezonings on Couchville Pike already, at the end closer to Bill Road, and that has resulted in some improvements on Couchville Pike, most notably the traffic light that's there now at Bell and Couchville, which I just received a email about from one of our neighbors in District 13, sending a thank you and saying how that has helped with the traffic in that area. A few things that make this a little bit different. I'm a little weary when we talk about straight rezonings, and I spoke with I always speak to developers about this, and Mr. Wilkinson knows this as well. My concern when we do straight rezonings is that anything in that particular category could be built. So, for example, some of those uses that Mr. Gordon was just speaking about, some of those uses would be allowed when you do a straight rezoning. So I like to err on the side of a site-specific plan or a regulatory SP that would allow us to remove the zonings that we don't want, or the uses, excuse me, that we don't want. So that gives us as a community more power and more protection, because we're able to say, we're okay with this, but we're not okay with that. And there are SPs that we can do as well. Kristen, I see you have a question, so I will acknowledge you in just one moment. There are SPs that we also can do that would allow us to, talk about building materials and setbacks and things of that nature. So it does give us as a community a little more control. My concern that I have with this particular one is that at our last meeting, we did have some neighbors who had concerns about doing a rezoning without knowing exactly what would go there. So in our other rezonings on Couchville Pike, we know exactly what type of building was going there, what type of warehouse. We had the layout for the warehouse. I was able to see, those markups to see what the building would look like, how the building would be situated, and things of that nature. And with this, not really knowing what could potentially come. And I know that you all want to do a warehouse, but not really having that, that does give me some pause. Because I do like to know a little bit more before we go forward as a community. So I just wanted to kind of give that background information, so that everyone again can kind of be operating from that same place, and the property owner and the developers and representatives have said that they are open to doing that regulatory SP, so that we can make sure that we rule out any of the things that we don't want to see as a community. So I'll go ahead and start taking any questions, comments, or concerns. You can either raise your hand. There's a raise hand function if you hover over your name, or you can type in the chat if you have a question. So the first person that I saw was Kristen. So if you would like to unmute, you are recognized.
Yeah, hey Delishia, this is actually Corey. That's my wife's name, but
Oh, sorry,
anyway,
Corey.
you're all right. So, anyways, I like the idea of everything going industrial rather than residential. That's awesome. Um, I've drove around. I live on, around the area, and I've drove around, and these ones that already went IWD. I mean, if you guys haven't had a chance, drive around in there and check the jobs that are coming out at these places. There's a lot of good companies. I mean, we're taking companies from downtown Nashville, bringing them to District 29, which is helping the community and bringing jobs here closer to home. So, but I did have a question for you. Regulatory SP and IWD. So the only difference in those two is basically what Tom and John mentioned is that it's IWD, but you just drop off some, you know, different like bars and things like that, for an example.
So I'm going to that's an excellent question. Thank you for asking.
And then I had one more for you. That John
Okay.
can probably answer that one. But so I was looking the other day. I'm excited about the FedEx deal that was um it showed up yesterday over at the Airport East. Are you guys allowing them to do a straight ID rezone or IWD rezone, or will that be like what John and Tom's asking for, the regulatory SP?
I'm not familiar with a rezoning. Is that in another district?
No, it's District 29 in the Airport East Center. The FedEx deal that was announced yesterday.
You know what? I will have to look that up. So that either that's not a rezoning, that may be a deal that happened. That's not a rezoning that's on my radar right now. So that may
Mm-hmm.
be a company that is coming to an area that has been previously rezoned. But I will
Mm-hmm.
look that up while Matthew can answer the question about the difference in a straight rezoning, a
Yeah,
regulatory SP, and then a regular SP.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Hi, so this is Matt Wilkinson with the council office. So there's really one big difference between straight rezonings and like a regulatory SP, and that is when you do a regulatory SP, you're enabled to condition the zoning. And so it's really sort of like a built from scratch zoning district for this particular site.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's a regulatory SP, that means that you're really just looking at the regulations of the zoning ordinance and saying that you can do this, but we're not going to let you do that. So in this case, it's gonna say you can do all of, you're governed by the uses of IWD, or you're gonna be governed by the bulk standards of IWD, development standards of IWD. However, you're going to be required to perhaps do some landscaping, or you're going to be limited in your, so you're going to be able to do uses entitled under IWD, excluding things like waste management, sex club, racetrack,
Mm-hmm.
like that. And so, and as that goes through council, we can amend that and tweak it a little bit to meet the community demand. And when you
Mm-hmm.
start getting up to like a full blown SP, that's when you have like a full on design with it. That
Mm-hmm.
that you have like a set site plan that they have to follow with like roads going in certain places and the
Gotcha.
building has specific elevations. Um, it's sort of like an in between a straight rezoning and a full blown design based SP, where we're saying that you can do most of what you want. It's just we have some concerns about this and that we want to tamp that
Yeah.
down to make sure everybody's on.
Right. Right. Yeah, there's a lot of IWD going around this area, and I mean everybody I've seen that, went IWD already, the buildings they're putting up, I mean they're beautiful. They're landscaping them, they're making them look nice. Regulatory SP, that's nice. I mean, it's still IWD, or the regulatory SP. It's nice because you can drop the strip clubs out and things like that, but I mean, I don't see the big difference. I mean, these companies are coming in IWD that, got granted it to them before in the last couple of years. I mean, they all got IWD, and we're talking about the same area, and these guys are just bringing, You know, they're bringing good businesses to the community, so I don't really see a huge difference in why something would be SP or regulatory SP or IWD.
Thank you for that question, and thank you for that feedback. For me, the difference is everything that I do is going to be to protect the residents of my area and of my district. So someone could tell me I'm going to build a warehouse, and
Hmm.
then I could do IWD, and then they could build a racetrack or a sex club or something else that the community doesn't want. So, in
Gotcha.
an effort to keep the community safe and protected, I am going to put every protection I can to make sure that my residents know that I'm not going to do something that could potentially be harmful to them. And
Hmm.
there are, um, there are times that it may make sense to do a straight rezoning. We had one, I think it was on Couchville Pike, that was an SP. I think we did it, Matthew, and my memory may be failing me here, but if you can help me out if I get this wrong, I believe we did it as an SP, and they already started the building layout, and then there was another small amount that they were doing, maybe 2 acres that they were adding to it, that made sense to do it. I think IWD, because they had already done the building for the building that we discussed in the SP. So they had
Hmm.
already met all of the regulations that we as a community had set out. So in that
Gotcha.
case, it made sense. But just to be clear, because again, I want to give my residents the confidence that their council person is advocating for them. IWD is off the table for me because IWD does not give any protections to my community. But I will consider a regulatory SP or just a straight SP so that we can put those protections in place for the community.
Hmm. Yeah, I was just wondering because I mean, I live around the area and I got 11 industrial buildings in front of my house now. And I mean, it doesn't bother me. It's not, residential living. So that's fine. But I was just wondering if that was thought about what you just said, you're thinking about what's it called again? Regulatory SP rather than IWD. Was that thought for your community when the big 11 industrial buildings went up off of Old Murfreesboro Road and Reynolds Road? So
I would
what
have
kind
to
of
I would have
buildings
to
they were
see
putting in there?
when those rezonings were done because that could have been a rezoning prior to me, or when you.
It was 2 years ago. It's off of Reynolds. It's actually off of Old Murfreesboro Road, and then it goes clear down, Reynolds Road.
I'll have to look that particular rezoning up to see what I can find from that time and to find the notes from that time. What
Hmm.
I will say is that I believe in when you know better, you do better. So even if 2 years ago, if I did a straight rezoning, which I'm very sure I remember us talking about SPs 2 years ago. So if there would have had to have been a special circumstance that would have allowed that to happen, because even 2 years ago we were talking about not doing straight rezonings and we were talking about SPs. But
Gotcha.
I will pull that information up and see what I can find to see
Hmm.
what may have been different in that case. But at this point in time, because I do know the risk of doing a straight rezoning to IWD, that's something that is off the table. And I have been contacted by some of the neighbors that live on Couchville Pike and Reynolds Road. And goodness, I just drew a blank, but the street that's right behind Pleasant Hill, I have been reached out to by some of the neighbors that are over there who have been supportive of the warehouses on this side of Couchville Pike that we're looking at. But some of the neighbors do not want those warehouses to extend over into their residential area. So those are things, when the community says that it's not what they want, I have no benefit of
Hmm.
moving forward with a project that my community does not want. I appreciate the jobs that they are bringing with the developments that we have done. We have potentially brought hundreds of jobs to District 29, which is amazing. But I'm not going to push something that my community doesn't want.
And if I could just jump in real quick, the property along Reynolds and Old Murfreesboro, that's Airport Logistics Park, that's been zoned IR since 1996. And I think on your other question regarding the FedEx land that they just sold to another developer,
Hmm.
that's already zoned IWD, so that wouldn't go through the council process. They would just have to get building permits and site plans approved by codes.
The whole area is IWD.
For the whole area that FedEx is selling is already zoned IWD, and that's been zoned IWD since 2000.
Gotcha. So I didn't know the full 70 something acres was.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate it. Do we have any other questions? Anyone else have any questions or would like to give any feedback? And again, we do have 2 more presentations tonight. Please know that this is just a conversation, so no decisions are being made at this moment. This is the opportunity for us to get feedback from the community. Again, you will have the opportunity to reach out to me directly with questions or concerns. You will also have the opportunity to speak at planning, and I'll make sure that that information is shared out through social media and in the newsletter. And if this does move forward at council, you will have the opportunity to call and speak in support or in opposition. But before we move on to the next project, scrolling through and I don't see anyone with their hand raised. So is there anyone else who would like to be recognized? If so, you can either raise your hand or you can unmute.
Hi, this is John Gordon again, and I just wanted to mention again that we are open to the regulatory SP with limiting the square footage to say the 500,000 square feet that was mentioned in the staff emails, and also to limit the uses so that we could leave it as open as possible for warehouse distribution type uses, but also limit by removing these other uses that are not desirable for the community.
Thank you. I appreciate you for sharing that. And with those other ones, the rezonings that I actually participated in on Couchville Pike, with those, I was able to do a tour of some of those facilities that were built by that particular developer. So I was able to attest to the quality of what was coming to our district. And I was very pleased with the product that they were willing to put forth. So again, this is a conversation. So I don't see any other hands in the queue. So we will go ahead and move on to our next presentation. Mr. Gordon, Mr. White, thank you all so much for participating. And again, anyone on the call, District 29 neighbors, even neighbors from surrounding districts, if you have questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out. We're going to go ahead and move to Mr. Buford next. If you can give him the sharing privileges, Mr. Wilkinson, and then we will end out with the Colemans talking about their project.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, Mr. Buford. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for letting me take some time. Does it show the screen right now? I'm not seeing that it is.
You'll need to, you're the presenter, but you'll need to share it. So you'll need to push the button to share your screen and share the PowerPoint or a PDF that you're going to be using.
Okay. All right. Hi, my name is Andy Buford. I am a small business owner, and sorry, I'm trying to get it. Can't see where it's working. And I work with my wife, and we have 2 small children. This is my proposal. I have a property on Bell Road. It is down the road from that Couchville Pike property. It might be over a mile away. And I drive down this road all the time, and I don't really see any commercial development on Bell Road for, I think it's about 5 miles. And when I went down to the city and asked them, they said that there is no sewer access at this time. And that was a year ago. It's been a year since I went down and asked that. And so I was hoping, since I don't have sewer access. If I could put self-storage on the facility. Davidson County does require sewer for commercial properties, and so I was wondering if I could put a property that did not have sewer on it. I did research and had a what is it called? A research done, and I asked them if it would be a good place for it, and they said that it would be a good place for self-storage. There's two ways that this can go. I can either just build a normal one-story self-storage, or according to the study that I had done, I could put up to a 3-story building. I'm just looking for, and I'll show you some examples. It would look something like that, and one of those. And then this is the overlay, the site footprint that I was looking for. And I'm just looking for SP specifically for self-storage. I don't need any other uses for the property. So if that would be acceptable, I would like to do that. And that is my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Buford, and we will open this up for questions in just a moment. Matthew, I know that we had looked at this about 2 years ago when we first started talking about this potentially coming. Do you happen to remember for the building of that scale and magnitude? Do you know if they would still be able to do that without having sewer access? Or I remember something along the lines of maybe if the building was a certain footprint, possibly that it was going to have that access. And forgive me, my memory's a little shaky. That was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, mine is as well. I will say, I think on the bigger model, it's like 3 stories tall, and it's internal. I'm not sure. I'd have to get with codes and see what their requirements are for that, because I would think that there would be probably an office area included with that. And if there's an office area, you'd likely need to have a restroom to meet codes, and the restroom would need to have access to sewer or perhaps a septic, but I don't know if they would be allowed to do septic there. So that would just be more questions to ask. I think if I remember correctly, I think what we were looking at originally was like one of those small exterior entry 1-level storage facilities where you drive up to the door and you roll it up and you go in and get your stuff and you come out, not the bigger multi-story ones. But that's a conversation I should have with codes.
I would also be okay with that. I'm not against anything. You guys tell me what to do. I want to follow the rules and do everything right. So if that is what is asked of me, I have no problem with that.
Well, Mr. Buford, it is always appreciated when people come willing to work with the community and wanting to work with the community. So thank you for that. What we can do, I would say is, you might want to get with codes to make sure that those requests would be available without you having the sewer and sewage. But let's hear from some people in the community. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, or thoughts? And again, this is right there at the intersection of Couchville Pike and Bell Road. So it's one parcel over from the intersection of Couchville Pike and Bell Road. So right now, the only thing that's there is somewhat of a grassy, rocky area. Which may be, Mr. Buford, I don't know if you've already looked into this, but you may also need to look into the topography for that area as well, because if I remember correctly, it may be the parcel beside yours, but those parcels over there, there's a lot of, there just may be some topography concerns. So I would definitely recommend that you check those out as well.
Yes, ma'am.
I do see a hand. Christine, you are recognized.
Hi, thank you. This is Christine Field. I'm just wondering, isn't that right across from the Hamilton Church Park Marina?
Yes.
Okay. I just don't know why you want to put all this industry out here when it's the lake, and I think we should keep it beautiful. And I think that is not going to be beautiful or very nice to look at. And I wish we wouldn't do industry out here at all. I wish we would do other things.
Yes, ma'am. I would be open to making it brick. I would be open to leaving a lot of trees. I don't want to make it just an ugly piece of concrete. So I'm definitely open to doing things that would keep the beauty of the area.
And Christine, I thank you for sharing your thoughts on it. I appreciate the feedback. Let me ask you this: Are you? And I definitely understand that concern as well, because we do. Mr. Wilkinson can tell you that one of the things that I'm always looking at is like the aesthetics of anything that we do, which is another reason why I lean towards SPs, because that does give us more control as a community. If this is something that is further back off of Bell Road, where you won't be able to see it. Well, one, if the building looks nice, right? Like what he just showed was, in my opinion, a nice looking building. If it is further back where either you can't see it, or if there are like tree buffers that are still kind of protecting the view, so that it's not taken away from, the scenic look of that area, would you be okay with it then? Or are you still, just not wanting storage right there?
I just think storage right there is a bad idea. One of the reasons I wanted to live out here was it's so pretty, and there's all the trees, and dogwoods in the spring, and it's the lake, and it's, why do you want to make it industrial out here? I just don't understand that thinking. I don't think it's right for the area at all. I think it's just going to take the property values down, and I think it's a bad idea. And a lot of things around there are pretty, like, those apartments they look nice. You go, the sailboat, marina is right across the street. And I just don't think self-storage belongs near a marina.
Yes, ma'am. And also part of this is I could also store for the boating for the marina. Since it is right across the street, some people may want to keep some of their boating material at this location. So I think that those two things could go together.
Well, they could. That would make more sense to me than just storage, or people ugly storage. I mean, if it, kind of tied into the boating, then that might make sense.
Yes, ma'am. And I would be definitely looking at how to do that. That's something that I would be trying to do.
And Christine, just I do want to address the question that you had about why we would want the area to be industrial. So these are parts of, like, communities have like community plans, and these are parts of like community plans. And this is, what the neighbors in the area have stated that they wanted. And again, this was more so along Cashel Pike. So this conversation had not really extended out to Bell Road. This was more so on Cashel Pike, which connects the Donaldson Pike area and the airport with the Bell Road area. So a lot of that has to do with the proximity to the airport, with it being more so hidden from the community, so to speak. I know that most people that are traveling on Cashel Pike are just kind of using that as a cut through. The homes that are on Cashel Pike are on the other side. So this particular side was the side that had been predetermined and something that the community supported. But again, if this is something that the community is not interested in, then we can definitely have conversations about what we would like to see there. I think the lack of sewage does impact that. That makes it a lot harder to put something there. So I think when I talked to Mr. Buford previously and he expressed his concern, he was open to look at various things, but there were limitations because of that particular parcel of land and because they don't have sewage going that far down. And also, this is not, I'm not advocating for it or against it. I just want to make sure that you have that information to kind of answer those questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing your thoughts. Corey has a question.
Yeah, just had a quick question. So, I mean, I think it's a great idea on that side of the road. Christine, that land across the street that's on the lakeside, that's all government land, TWRA land, which is never going to be developed or touched. I mean, you're going to always have your nature, your hiking trails and stuff right there on around that lake. I mean, they can't touch that land. And number two, and then up the road a little bit, on Pleasant Hill, it's like the next road up. There's boat storage right there already. They already put in. And I mean, in the picture you presented, I forget your name. What was your name?
Andy.
Andy, the picture you presented of the, facility you're looking to put in. I mean, it's good looking.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing that. And again, I like to stress this is just a conversation, everyone. So everyone's thoughts will be listened to. This is not a decision-making call. This is a conversation call. Does anyone else have any questions, thoughts, or concerns that they would like to lift up about this particular parcel? Okay. If not, Mr. Buford, thank you so much for presenting. And I will let you know as I'm hearing more from our neighbors, whether that's in support or not in support. I will definitely continue to let you know what the concerns have been with the community. I would recommend reaching out to codes and finding out, if you're going to be, if you could even do that without having the storage. And then maybe looking to see what other things you would be able to do, knowing that there's some limitations on that parcel. And we would love to get you back out in front of the community again to discuss any updates that you found.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buford. Thank you for your time. And now our last presentation is on the parcel on Anderson Road. This is a follow-up from our meeting on February the 10th. Where the presentation, the developers came out and presented on the 10th, and this was a follow-up from that conversation. I did want to make sure that, before we move forward, that this came before the community, more than one time, so we can make sure that people are hearing what is being requested. Ms. Coleman, will you be the one presenting, or is someone else on the call going to present?
Council member, this is Adam Sager on the call. I'll be presenting again for Mr. Coleman.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. If you can make Adam the presenter, and Adam, you can go ahead.
Adam, you're the
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for having us back again. Like you said, we presented on, I guess it was about a month ago. And sorry, I'm doing two things at once right now. I hit the share button. There we go. Okay, and we presented about a month ago, and this is on 3156 Anderson Road. My name is Adam Sager. I'm a civil engineer. I work with Dale and Associates, and we do a lot of work around town, all around Nashville, and we do site design and land development and things like that. We're the designer on the project, and so to orient everybody, I'm going to toggle back and forth a little bit, but on a map, if you were to go to Anderson Road and there's that 90-degree bend in the road, just before you get to the bend, this is us right here, 3156 Anderson Road, owned by John Coleman, and John is on the call as well. And so what we are proposing is an SP rezone, and the property area is almost 5 acres. It's 4.9 acres. The existing zoning is AR2A, which, if you've heard me talk before, it's kind of like a non-zoned area. In other words, everything grew up around it, and this is leftover area that's zoned AR2A. It won't move forward as AR2A. It'll be something else, and we're proposing it to be SP, and we're proposing 22 detached single-family homes. So we're just single-family homes, not duplexes or condos or anything like that. And the proposed density, I think, people are often interested in density. What we're proposing is 4.48 units per acre. The surrounding area around us, meaning if you were to go back to this and you look at all the zonings and things around us, a lot of it is R10. You can kind of see right there is an R10, RS10, R10. That zoning is 4.36 units to the acre. And so essentially, we're splitting hairs at that point. We're about the same density as everything around us. And so our proposal is this document right here. What it does is the SP will take the units and put them on an HPR development, and they'll all be rear loaded. And the thought is to preserve green space, provide more park-like open space, and front the units onto the public streets and put the garages on the back door. So if you're in this community or you're outside the community, as you drive down Anderson Road, you'll see the fronts of the houses, no driveways. And as you turn onto Alicia Lane, you'll see the fronts of the houses, no driveways. You'll see the sidewalks and porches and things like that. And if you were to drive into the community, you'll come in basically the private driveway for the community, and it comes into an open space. And you'll see a courtyard here, and you'll see the fronts of all the houses, not the backs. And then you'll go on the loop drive where you'll see the garages. They all have 2-car garages. And then another thing to point out is Laura Lee Lane up here. That is a public road. Planning has asked us to extend this through the property, which we'll do. But we need to terminate these roads with cul-de-sacs for the fire department so they can turn around okay. And that's what's happening here. That's why you're seeing this P-shaped turnaround here. And if you look on the aerial behind it, you'll see an existing cul-de-sac. That will go away. So if anybody's on the call and you're one of these neighbors here, that pavement in front of your house will be taken away and repaved. And then this, it'll be shifted over to here. And then these 3 units up here will front on the public road, just like so, kind of mimicking coming on down the road. A conceptual image of what's being proposed is here. Architects can do a good job now. It almost looks like a real life drawing. These are architectural renderings of some of the units being proposed, porches, and as you can see, no driveways. And then these are some character images of other areas where people use the courtyard concept, where there's a living space, a green space in the middle, and the units will front onto a common area. And it's something that we do quite often around town, and it gets used quite a bit. And so if I would go back to here, that would be this internal courtyard right here. In fact, the courtyard we're proposing here is probably even a little bit bigger than what you saw on those pictures. And so that's a quick rundown. I know that we presented last time, and so I just wanted to kind of refresh everybody on what it is that we're doing, who we are, and I'm available to take any questions you might have, and happy to do so. So I'll stop there, council member, and if you have questions or anybody in the community that wants to ask, just let me know.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. And I'll give a little background here, and then we'll open it up for anyone who has any questions or concerns. So I have not, I believe, if I remember correctly, I think I've only done one rezoning that has been residential. I know that a lot of people in the community in some surrounding districts have been having concerns about, growth in the area And I believe that any growth that we have has to be, responsible. So, some of the things that I look at, I consider traffic, I consider our schools and, the crowding in our schools and things of that nature. And some of you all know that there has been planning recently did a study to look at our area just to kind of compare our growth with the growth of some of the other areas. And it was, pretty comparable from what they found in some areas. The communities were growing faster than us. I know some people thought that, maybe we were outpacing some other areas, but the planning department was able to, kind of provide some of that feedback. And I'll be sharing that presentation out in our newsletter as well. So anyone that hasn't seen it will be able to kind of see it and look at the context. Because I do know that there are like concerns with things like traffic. I mean, I live right off of Anderson Road, so I know living in this community, like I know the concerns and what people have about traffic and things of that nature. So I'm not supportive of, really high density projects or projects that would put a lot of extra cars on our community streets. This project is small enough, in my opinion, that this is something that, with the community support, it is something that I could support. I know that this particular developer does have another development a little bit further down the street, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from some of the people that live over there. Have liked those houses. They were appear to be very well built houses. They're going for really good market rate value and have added value to the community. So the one question that we did have when this came up before, the question that came up was about private streets versus public streets. And I know I was expecting that to kind of come up more at our February the 10th meeting, but we didn't have a lot of people, really, it came up and it was discussed, but there wasn't a lot of, support or pushback either way. I mean, it was kind of neutral, I would say. This development does have private streets. Is that correct, Mr. Seeger?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And just for the transparency of everyone on the call, there are pros and cons to private streets. So some people like communities with private streets because that is something that like the city does not have to maintain. So some people feel like it's a good use, like it's more fiscally responsible. There are people that don't like the private streets because that means that the HOA is then responsible for the street. So I know that there is an area in our district that does have private streets. It's an older, a little bit older community, and they have private streets, and they're having some concerns about their paving and things of that nature. So that is something that has come up with people having questions about that, private versus public streets. So if you all would like to speak on that, I know that there are people that are interested in hearing about it.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I know that was a question before. I'll try to add enough flavor to answer the whole question. I guess I could say a couple things to that. One, people use the term private street, but really what these are people's driveways. And so it's really no different as you pull into this community that you're pulling into somebody's private driveway. And so to accommodate a rear-loaded concept, which is what this is, so that everybody's facing the road, what you would want to do is have their driveways come around the back and park in the back so that your house is facing the front. And to accommodate that, all of these gray shaded areas, the drives right here, is really their own private driveways for those houses themselves. And yes, it is fully owned and maintained by the HOA. We do many projects like this around town. I haven't really run into this question a whole lot, to be quite honest with you, because it's usually assumed and preferred that they are owned and maintained by the HOA because that way the public does not have to pay for them. In other words, if there was a pothole here and the community said, hey, come fix my pothole, they would just call up Public Works and say, hey, we're going to spend the taxpayers' money to come fix our pothole. What this developer has done, because that comment came up before, he did say he's willing to pave these streets according to public standards, which means you're going to get a thicker layer of asphalt, a thicker layer of stone, and these streets are going to hold up just fine. And you can do that because it is an SP, and you can request that of them. Another thing I wanted to point out is that, I think it's maybe a perception thing, and maybe the name street might throw us off, but it's really no different liability and permission-wise than if you were to drive to Kroger or Walmart or any other place, and you pull into their parking lot, and there's a pothole in their driveway parking lot. The people who own that asphalt are responsible for replacing and maintaining that. And so in that instance, it would be the Property Owners Association for Walmart, Kroger, and those kind of the places. And the same would go for this here. It's a private strip of asphalt that if there was a pothole, the neighbor, the person that lived in this community would get together with their own HOA and fix those. And historically, we have not seen any issues in these circumstances here. Now, council member, you do point out maybe there's a small older neighborhood in your district that this may have come up before on. I think over the course of 2008 to 2010, whenever the economy took a downturn and people didn't have as much and HOAs were maybe suffering a little bit more, maybe some of that took place. But I want to show you a couple examples of what would happen on the private versus public. And again, I want to reiterate that what we're trying to accomplish here isn't just to come in and build something. John's a member of the community and he wants to build something nice and it's going to be long lasting and it's going to have to sell to the community as well. So I just pulled up on your screen a street view of the neighboring street, Delishia Lane. So this is right next to us. In fact, the property we're talking about is back through those trees that way. And if we had to do public streets, what you would be seeing is a system just like this. The garage doors would have to face the front and there would be driveways up and down. And so, if the community wants, there's nothing wrong with this, but what I'm saying is if the community wants just driveways up and down a public street and Metro to maintain the street, then that's what the development would look like. The reason we're proposing SP and the reason we're doing private streets is to do something more than. And I want to show you another development, and I'll let you go with me here on the map of Nashville. And I'm going to go up here because I know I'm just going to one that I know that we've done and worked on. Let's see, where am I? I'm going up to the Green Hills, Lipscomb area. There's a place called Glen Road, and anybody can drive there if they want to. And if we go to Glen Road, they did a concept where they did private streets and no driveways along the front. And I'm entering their community now. And as you can see, this right here is a private driveway. Ours is going to be a little different, but this is the same concept. The private driveway comes in, the garage doors and the trash cans and everything are tucked behind the houses. And then as you drive on the road up through here, all you really see are the fronts of houses. There's no driveways up and down through there, and you're just looking at the fronts of them. And so as we go here, there's one entryway right there. That's a private drive, and that serves multiple houses so that all the other houses can face the road and there's no more driveway cuts or cars parked in driveways along the public road. And so coming back to our development, that's what we want to bring is a nice sense of place. As you enter it, you're looking at the fronts of units, not the backs or garage doors. And we just feel like it's a superior product and a better situation because it doesn't cast a burden upon the public to pay for these private driveways. And I think it creates a better product in the end anyway. So again, just to reiterate, I know that was quite a lot, but if we were to go to a public street system, we would not be able to have these private driveways around the back. There would be driveways off the front. And we just feel that this development and this is really more of how Nashville is being developed and what planning is pushing us to do. This is more planning's influence as well. And so I don't know if that was too much, council member, but I hope that helps answer the question and provide some understanding as to why we're proposing what we are.
No, definitely never too much information. I prefer that people overshare so that the community will have everything that they need to kind of weigh in on the conversation. I did receive a few questions that we're going to address. And then I see a few people in the chat have some questions. Could you go down to the other property, I believe it's Cole's Landing. I think that's the other one, if I'm not mistaken. And can you show the community what that one looks like? Because does that one also, if I remember correctly, does that one also have the private streets?
I'm not as familiar with that. I know John has worked with our firm before. I don't think I worked on that one. Do you know the address? Is it Mr. Coleman's property or is it a different one? I'm happy to go to the screen.
Yes, I'm referring to the other. I'm sorry, I don't know if that was Matthew or the Colemans.
Yes.
Yes, the other development is at 3413 Old Anderson Road. There were 9 houses. They're all complete. We're just finishing up, and there were private roads in that development.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to give the people an opportunity to see what the other development looked like over there that you all did.
Here it is.
It's not fully built. I hope it's. I hope you can see through the construction, but that's where it is. The side looks like a pipe being built in this picture.
That's an old one now, and it is finalized now. If anybody'd like to drive by.
Okay, and I think there was kind of some feedback on the call, so I don't know if everyone heard that, but those are some older pictures of the development is what they were saying. So if you would like to drive by, it's at the corner, it's near Old Anderson and Anderson Road. So it's 3413. So if you want to drive by, you're able to see it. I have spoken with some of the neighbors that live over there who have been very complimentary of that particular project. And then I wanted to just address something that Mr. Seeger said. I think what you're saying is correct in the sense that I do know in other parts of the city where we tend to see developments that are a little nicer and more upscale. We've been seeing some of those private driveways. I think the reason why it comes up a lot out here, because I know that we're one of the communities that brings it up. I think it is specifically because we've seen some developments out here in our community where it hasn't worked. So that's why it's been so much of a concern for people out here. But I do think that it helps to know that, there are, of course, multiple options, right? There's the option of if the community wants to go with the view with the private driveway or the private street and having those garages on the back, or if the community doesn't want to go with that and they want to go with with a public street, it would change the layout and it would look a little more consistent with the properties on Alicia Lane. But I do think that it is reassuring to know that there are multiple options. I will address these questions really quickly that I received, and then we'll go to the individuals that are in the chat and that want to speak. So one question was, are these going to be private streets or turned over to Metro, which we just discussed? It sounds like we have either of those options. It sounds like you all are proposing private, but would be willing to look at Metro. The next question is, will there be an HOA to maintain the integrity of the development? What is the potential price point? Has there been a traffic study? And will the utilities be underground? So if you can address those, we would appreciate it.
Okay, I hope I get all these, and I heard John pop on, so he may have to help me as well, but I'm going to go backwards from the questions. The first one were utilities. Are they going to be underground? And the answer is yes. The utilities in this development will be underground, and so all of that is true. Number two is, John, do you want to go ahead and address price point? I heard her say that as well.
The houses at Old Anderson range from 280,000 for the smaller ones and to 320 for the larger ones, and I would say it would be in the same price point.
Yes. And then you asked about an HOA. Yes, an HOA is required for these types of developments, and one would be instituted, and they would maintain the yards, the landscaping, and everything else. Keep in mind that it sounds like from some of these questions, maybe there's a bad taste in some mouths out there for HOAs and things like that. But keep in mind, for the success of this development and for John to put in a nice product like this and to do all of this, it requires that it have a certain level of maintenance and a certain level of aesthetic. And so the way to do that is to enact the HOA to mow everybody's lawn and do all the landscaping together and things like that. So you don't have one person not pulling their weight and they don't mow their yard and it kind of looks bad. That's not the case. And something like this, what typically happens is that the HOA will come in and maintain everything together to keep it looking nice. So I don't know if that helps us or if that does it, but it usually bodes well to give people reassurance that an HOA is going to be hiring landscape folks to maintain the community. Did I address all of them, council member, or was there one other?
I believe there was one more. Let me pull it up. And I don't think that the concern is with the HOA per se. I think people like HOA. Well, various people have various thoughts on HOAs. I think that HOAs do provide a level of protection for the community to keep the property looking nice. I think the concern, and again, this is speaking, I don't want to like cast a dark shadow on your particular project based on what happened in another neighborhood, but I think that, people just kind of want some reassurance to hear why, this can't happen again. And I think, Matthew, we've kind of talked about it before if you want to speak on it after Mr. Seeker. But the question is more so, what happens, right now today, if you all built this and let's say that someone buys a house there, everything looks great. But then, 10 years from now or 20 years from now, if that is no longer, like if the city is not paving those streets, then the private driveways, the HOA should be the one that's like maintaining those areas. Well, the question has been, or I think what has kind of happened is what happens if that HOA dissolves, or what happens if the HOA no longer is collecting fees that are enough to do those necessary updates. So I think that was the question. So if Mr. Seeger, if you want to touch on that, and then Matthew, if you can touch on it, and then we'll quickly go to the remaining few questions that we have in the chat and people that have their hands raised.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, all of this want to have our communities looking nice, but at the same time, there's only so much we can control. And so we can't really control our neighbor from mowing his lawn. And, we can go down the street and say, well, that guy's not pulling his trash in and that guy's not doing that. And so I understand the concern about the long-term play of, hey, this development goes in, an HOA comes in, what if, and that's fair. I can only assure you that the SP requires the houses to be built in a certain manner, way, shape, or form that typically provide standards that are long-lasting and withstanding. And we stand behind this design and feel that it would be good long-term. And by building the streets out of a Metro Public standard on the cross-section, please don't quote me on this, but I want to say you're looking at like a 25 to 30-year shelf life on the pavement. And what I mean by that is on a public street, you think about it being driven on all day long by hundreds or even thousands of motorists. These are going to be private drives with the same pavement section being driven on by a few individuals. And so it's not going to get the wear and tear that a public street normally does. So it's conceivable that this development is going to go, 30 plus years and you won't see the first pothole. And that's not uncommon with a lot of driveways out there. So you know, I understand what you're saying. It's understandable. We want to put something in place that's long lasting and beautiful, and we all care about that. But I don't know if the making this public versus private really changes a lot. I don't really think it's very much different one way or the other. If most of the time what we run into is that if it's private, people like that because the public taxpayer doesn't have to fund for somebody else's potholes because, yeah, I don't know. I'll stop talking there, but I think you kind of understand my point, and I hope that helps a little bit.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and jump on in and just do a couple of basic overviews. First of all, it's impossible for the HOA to ever dissolve on a development like this because the HOA is the owner of the land. It's a horizontal property regime. And so what that means is that the people who buy the units are buying their house alone. They're not buying the land around the house. They're buying their unit. And because they buy their unit, they're buying into the HOA and will have fractional ownership of the land that is collective through the HOA. And so the only way for the HOA to dissolve is to dissolve the HPR. And for the only way to dissolve the HPR is to have a unified ownership or an agreed buyout to where everybody in the development agrees to sell, or depending on how they write their HOA docs, a certain percentage of the community agrees to sell, but then they all sell after that vote is taken. So it falls back into unified ownership, and the HPR and the HOA can be dissolved at that point. I think another thing to consider too is that the roads that they're designing they're not really streets. It's on a single parcel. So it is considered a driveway by Metro. If they were to do public streets, they would need to be 50-foot wide right-of-ways, which would dramatically change the design. And I think going back, a lot of the heartburn in this area, in District 29, and I know in the other districts in Antioch, is that there were a lot of planned unit developments done in the 70s and 80s, and I think even into the early 90s, where you ended up with traditional single-family lots that looked like a regular suburb, act like a regular suburb, that had HOAs, but then also had private streets. So it was a little different where you didn't have this collective, the HOA does everything. It was sort of like you have the HOA, and normally, and when you're in a traditional suburban HOA, it is, they essentially maintain the welcome sign, maybe judge some architectural standards. There might be a clubhouse, but other than that, they're not doing a whole lot. And when you have roadways like that have a 30 or even in some cases 40 or 50-year lifespan, you get to the point where you're on the third or fourth owner of these houses, and all of a sudden you have this cost bomb just drops on you. And so what ends up happening is over the course, people keep putting off paying into the HOA at an adequate level, and so they end up lowering the amount that is the assessment that's required, and so they don't take in enough to cover the paving of the road or the maintenance of the road. And what's left then is when it does need to happen, it requires a special assessment onto the owners that they're required to pay. And so I think that's sort of the difference there is because it's sort of a different feel. And Metro does not allow private streets anymore, other than those that serve, I think, less than 10 lots and are only allowed in certain parts of the city. Like it's not really allowed for a traditional suburban development to have a standard private street anymore. The difference being here that this is a single parcel and they're doing a horizontal property regime. So this driveway system is only on one parcel. And I think that's really the big difference here. So the people who buy into this, they know that they're buying into an HOA. They know that they're buying into something that is mostly private, and that they will have to pay into it, and that they will get a management company, and there's several around town, and the management company will maintain the contracts for the maintenance, and they'll schedule pothole repair, they'll schedule landscaping, and they'll go to the leadership of the HOA and say, we need this much money to cover this. and you need to have this much in your reserve to prevent the need for special assessments. And if there's ever a case where an owner or a group of owners decide we're just not going to pay our HOA fees, in most HOA documents, the HOA itself has a right to put a lien on the property to collect those fees to ensure that they can maintain the property. And so I think that's sort of the special protection there, is just making sure that you have good leadership at the HOA and make sure you have a good management company. And that's really the developer's role, is to set that up and to start that strong culture. And usually that'll carry over because people want their property to appreciate in value, and people want to have a nice place to live. And so I think that's really sort of the protection there. Is it's sort of mostly in the HOA documents with the liens and whatnot. But it's also the way that this one is set up on a single parcel versus those older ones that had private streets where you had individual parcels. So it felt more like a regular suburban neighborhood. Whereas this is, it's an HPR, so they only own their house, so they know that the HOA is necessary to maintain the rest. And I hope I didn't over explain and complicate.
No, that was perfect, Mr. Wilkinson. That's exactly what I wanted you to explain. I know we've talked about that before, but I knew that you were very much way more well versed in explaining that than I would have been. So I wanted to make sure that you know, anyone on the call could hear that directly so that they could understand. We'll really briefly hit the questions that are in the chat, and then we see a couple of hands up. One question was no brick. So are you all planning to have any brick on this particular project? And I'll let you answer that in one moment. We did get a feedback. Great idea. Looks great. And then we also have the question of how much per square foot. So if you could share, are you all looking at brick? And what's the price per square foot? If you don't have that yet, if you could tell us what is the potential square footage of the homes, and then can non-residents walk in the area? And then we'll go to hitting the people that have their hands up after those questions are answered.
All right, thank you. I did some quick calculating from what Mr. Coleman said earlier. If the prices are in the 280 to 350 price point, the units are going to be in the 1,600 square feet on the low end, up to 1,800, 1,900 square feet, roughly in that area. And whenever you do that math, you're looking at about $180 to $200 per foot. So that's just kind of ballpark in there. Well, actually, I'm sorry, I went the wrong way. About $170, $180, $190 per foot. That's about where that math is ending up.
And the only thing
And then, let's see.
I'm sorry, someone is
John, answer about brick
hold on one second, Mr. Seeker. I apologize. Someone is not muted. So if you're not speaking, if you can mute, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. As you can see here, these units that are proposed are siding hardy board with masonry. Again, these are just architectural renderings. They're not final. But the brick and masonry on the SP, it's almost always called out on just about every SP, and so is this one, where vinyl siding, untreated wood, EFIS, some of those products that historically have not been very received well by the community, those are not allowed in this development. And so you can't do vinyl siding, vinyl stuff. You can't do EFIS or untreated wood. But what it does say is that you have an arrangement of materials that you can work from. And architects can make these houses now look really good with a myriad of different materials. And so the toolbox they have to work from with materials is going to be a hardy board siding. I just did a house and have that on my house right now. It works great. It's awesome. Brick is allowed. Stone is allowed. Metal features are allowed. Things like that. So I don't know if the question was geared towards, hey, why don't you have brick? They should be all brick, or I hate brick. I don't want brick. I don't know what the motivation behind the question was, but Brick is certainly allowed. I don't know if that's something that John is going to choose to incorporate into his facade or not.
Thank you so much. And now we'll go ahead and go to the questions. We'll start with Suzanne Coleman. We'll go ahead and acknowledge you. And then after Suzanne, we will go to Randall Bowers. And then we will go to Christine. You still have your hand up. I'm not sure if that's an old hand from last time or if it's a new hand. But if it's a new hand, I will go to you right. Oh, you put it down. Okay. So we'll go to Suzanne first, and then we'll go to Randall.
Got any questions?
Hello, this is Suzanne Coleman. I am John Coleman's wife, the developer's wife. I did not have a question, but I'm just voicing my support for the beautiful project.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Coleman. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Randall, you are recognized. You would need to unmute yourself.
Hey there. So I think my question has been answered, but the aesthetic of the properties, are you confident that they're going to resemble the pictures that we see there? One of the things I find charming about this area is that it doesn't look like communities that you would see, the newer modern communities in East Nashville and the Nations. It's not filled with tall and skinnies. So I'm just curious about the aesthetic of the property. Is it going to look like what you see in these photos?
Yes.
Okay.
Is it going to be similar?
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful.
Yes.
That's all. That was my question. So thank you.
Okay, aesthetics. Yeah, great question, Randall. Thank you for that. That's two things I can say is, one, I'm going to go back to this picture on Old Anderson. Please understand that this is under construction and it's not the final product if you want to go see the final product, but this gives you a flavor of some of the products that Mr. Coleman is currently building. Again, these are under construction. You see some weeds and grass and stuff going on, so please ignore that. I'm sure it's a lot cleaned up and looking nice now, but that gives you kind of a concept of what he has done in the past. And then with the architectural renderings that were provided that look like this, I think you start to get a feel for the look that he has done and an architectural style that he is comfortable with. That doesn't mean to say there won't be brick or stone or masonry or something else, just that that's what's being proposed at this time. And so on the SP, like we have, it's certainly possible that somebody comes in and maybe does more brick than that siding look you just saw, than the farmhouse kind of look, or maybe somebody incorporates a little more stone on the features, but it's geared to use materials that make it look nice. And so that's the intent of the SP. Now, the other thing I can tell you, one, I don't build buildings. I don't have control over the final siding or anything like that. But what I do have control over as the land planner designer is how this is being laid out. And so what we've done on this project intentionally is we wanted it to feel a little bit more spaced out. What you see in East Nashville and in Green Hills and in places like that, and you use the word tall skinnies, it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, is because Metro allows these types of buildings to be separated by down to 6 feet apart. And so in some of the areas, like up in Green Hills or Belmont area, those houses have only so much square feet to build on, and they're 6 feet apart, and they get this perception that they're tall and skinny, and some of them are. And that's the only way to go, is vertical. Well, here we got a little bit more elbow room. And as you can see along Anderson Road and on Alicia Lane, we've separated these buildings out more than the minimum. So they're spaced further apart than what is required by Metro. And if you look at the existing houses on Alicia, you can see kind of the spacing there. And we tried to mimic that as a minimum. We didn't want to come in here and create a layout where we facilitate a situation where a tall and skinny can exist. And so on purpose, we tried to space these out a little bit more than what some of those other newer neighborhoods do, for the sole purpose of maintaining this more residential suburban look, not an urban look. So I don't know if that fully answers it, but I hope that helps.
Absolutely. I think that, like I said, the charm about this area is that it doesn't look like that modern urban aesthetic that you're starting to see pop up in West Nashville, and that you're definitely seeing in East Nashville. So that was just my question. I think the photos look great. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I have received one last question, and I've gotten a couple of good pieces of feedback. Looks nice. I think it'll be a great addition to the neighborhood. I've gotten some feedback that the houses, people that have seen the houses on Old Anderson, that they love those that they love that particular project. So we're I'm just sharing out for transparency, like as I'm getting text messages or messages, I just want to make sure that that everyone's kind of operating with the same information. Two questions, I'm sorry. Can non-residents walk in the area? I mean, I would assume that they can because it's not gated, but can non-residents walk in the area? And then the second question was about a traffic study. I know traffic studies are typically done when there are more units, and I believe this may be 21 units or so, 19 to 21 if I remember correctly. But if you could just speak on any potential traffic implications, and if a traffic study has been done or will be done.
Got it. Yeah, two common questions, especially on the traffic. You're correct. This project is too small to officially warrant or trigger a traffic analysis. Being an engineer and looking at traffic studies, what happens is that in order to move the needle one way or the other, it really requires a lot of trips. And perception is that we're going to put 22 houses on here and there's going to be 44 cars. Well, the truth of the matter is not every single person wakes up at the exact same time and leaves their garage at the exact same time. And so it's spaced out. And so what you do is you use peak hour equivalent units. And so in the morning hours and in the evening hours, you do studies. And what happens is that as you look at local roads, Delishia Lane, or maybe slightly larger collector like Anderson Road, or even to the big roads, anything with less than about 100 units really doesn't tip the scales one way or the other. And so what's happened is that over time in Metro, there was a requirement years ago that was put into the ordinance that says if you have 100 units or more, it requires a traffic study. And then as more people moved into Nashville and people start thinking about traffic more, they lowered that threshold to 75 units. And so right now it reads that until you have 75 units, you don't have to do a traffic study because it's kind of a waste of time. It's really not going to provide us any valuable information. And so we're at 22 units. We've done traffic studies as low as 50 units before to help people. Maybe we're trying to determine the length of a storage of a left turn lane or something like that, and that's more of those purposes. But I can tell you that a traffic impact study on this project has not been done. It is not our intent to do one. And it's not because we don't care about traffic and we're not cognizant of it. It's just because the results of a traffic study aren't really going to tell us anything. It doesn't really move the needle. In other words, the results that come back are negligible when being considered with traffic flow on our roadways. And so just kind of trying to give you a little bit of mindset as to why we're not doing one on this project. Now, you asked about walking the sidewalks. I want to make sure this is clear that on any development in Nashville, the property frontages along Anderson Road, we'll have to continue that sidewalk on. And so right now there's a sidewalk that comes down Delishia Lane. It turns and I think it stops right here. So when this project's built, we'll be required to build the sidewalk and curb and gutter along Anderson Road for this stretch. We're responsible for our road frontage. The same goes for up here on Laura Lee Lane. As you can see, this is going to be a public road extension to a cul-de-sac with sidewalk around it right there. Those sidewalks are public and they're for anybody to use. The other sidewalks in this development are private. Now, can somebody walk along this sidewalk right here along the entryway and come back in here and look at it? Yeah, you could walk there and nobody will probably ever say anything. But from a liability ownership standpoint, think of it like this. You live at your house and in your driveway, there's a little sidewalk that goes from your driveway up to your front door, and that's your little sidewalk. Well, that's the same as what you're seeing on this drawing. These sidewalks shown are these people's front little sidewalks that go from the driveway to their front door. And so it's kind of more of I guess, just understanding what you're getting into. I don't think there's no police out here saying you can't walk on it because it's private, but the ones that you see internal to the development are privately maintained, and they're each house's own sidewalks up to their front door. So I hope that helps.
And real quick, if I can just jump in, we had a similar project to this. It was attached, but it was similar size, square footage, on an HPR over in Hermitage. And it was about 22 homes. And they ended up doing a traffic study for some slightly different reasons because they were on a busier intersection. But the traffic study that the traffic engineer came out said that their 20 home development would generate 110 trips a day, which is very small. And so I just thought I would throw that in for people to think on, just regarding traffic. And that's 100 over the course of the day. And when you look at a trip in the terms of a traffic study, if I go from my house to Kroger, that's a trip. And then from Kroger back to my house is another trip. So that trip to Kroger and back would be counted as 2 trips.
Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate it so much for giving that context. I don't see any additional hands up, so this is the last call. If anyone would like to give a question or a comment, and again, this is open for conversation. So if you have additional questions or comments that you would like to share, please reach out. You can have the conversation now. You can send me a message. You can email me, but please reach out if you have any additional questions. If you maybe don't feel like sharing them here. I will say initially I was a little more hesitant. I'm just always really I'm really hesitant when it comes to rezonings in our community. And one thing that I shared with you all when I first got elected, I don't think about just the right now. I really think about what is our community going to look like 10, 15, 20, 25 years from now, 50 years from now. When I leave my house to my daughter and she leaves it to her children, what is this community going to look like? So I think a lot about long-term impacts whenever someone requests a rezoning, and think about how it can help or hurt our community. So I always approach any rezoning with a lot of hesitation, especially residential rezonings, because I know that there's been concern in the past with our area. So I was very, very hesitant. I have been pleasantly surprised with the information that has been presented and with the renderings that they have presented. So if there's not opposition, I am leaning towards supporting this. Because I do think that it would be, I think it would be a good fit for our community. I think it would add value to the community. So, and I think that it is such a small development, with it only being roughly 20 houses or so. I think it's such a small development that it won't cause harm. I think it will add more value to the community as opposed to causing harm to the community. So I am leaning towards supporting this, but again, I want to hear from you. So if you're not in support, if you're in opposition, if you have questions or concerns, or if you are in support, or if you want to see something a little bit different, or want something else to be considered, please make sure to reach out to me, and I will send that information directly to the Colemans and to Mr. Seeger, so that we can make sure that we just kind of keep those lines of communication open. So with that, we're going to go ahead and close out the meeting. I will be announcing our next community meeting in the newsletter. We do have some events coming up. We are having a community meeting. We're trying to finalize the date. So we will be having one that's going to be the Southeast area with several council members coming together to have a community meeting. We do have that upcoming. I don't want to announce the date just yet because we're trying to work out those details. But I will be sending all that information out in the newsletter, as well as our next community meeting, so that we can discuss, some of the concerns that have come up in the community. And with that, thank you all so much for your time. As always, Ms. Rosie is on with us from the council office. Thank you so much for being here. And Matthew with the council staff, thank you all so much for being here and taking your time out. I know after working a really long day, sometimes it's real tiring to be on with the community and being here the whole time, but I appreciate you all so much for what you do for the city and for District 29. So with that, thank you all so much for joining us, and you all have a good evening.